Have you ever felt totally burnt out by your summer garden? Like you just wanted to rip everything out and be done for the season? Maybe the heat wiped out your energy, the weeds took over, or you just couldn't keep up with all of the harvests. Well, if so, I can 100% relate. But here's what most gardeners don't realize, and that is that fall is actually your second chance. Not just to plant again, but to grow a garden that's easier to manage, more enjoyable, and still incredibly productive. And right now is the perfect time to get started. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Audrey Crawford, a lifelong gardener from the Central Valley of California, and this is the Audrey's Little Farm Show, where I take the guesswork out of gardening and help you grow a successful garden one simple step at a time. So before we jump into all of the tips I have for you today, let me just say this. I truly believe that fall is the most underrated gardening season, especially for those of us gardening in a mild winter area like Zone 9. The weather is cooler, the pests are not as aggressive, and the crops you can grow, well, there are just so many to choose from. In fact, if you live in a hot climate, fall and winter might actually be your most productive season of the year because the heat is finally giving us a break, and as a gardener, you can actually enjoy being outside again. Plus, a lot of cool season crops are less demanding. You don't have to be in the garden harvesting every single day. Things like broccoli and cauliflower and carrots, they hold up really well just being in the garden. Unlike things like zucchini, where you have to be out there harvesting daily because if you skip 2 days, they're going to turn into baseball bats. And so right now, I know it's mid to late summer, but it is truly the best time to start planning for your fall garden. But if you're listening to this at a later time, say it's September or October, you're still not too late to plant a fall garden, especially if you're in a mild winter climate like I am here in the Central Valley of California. Because something I hear from gardeners all the time is that they'll look at a generic planting guide online and assume they missed their planting window because it will say something like plant by August or plant by September. But the thing is, those dates really don't matter if you live somewhere with a really mild winter, because those crops might not mature before it gets pretty cold, but they're just going to hold steady in the garden, and then in late winter and early spring, they're going to pick back up again, and you'll get your harvest then. And so that means whether you're planting in October or even November, it's still totally fine, but it's not the ideal time. Ideally, you're listening to this in real time and you're going to start planning your fall garden now so that you get everything in the ground and get those harvests as soon as possible. However, here's a quick example of how I can paint the picture of why planting dates truly matter and why planning now is a really good idea. So let's say I'm planting something like Brussels sprouts. These are a long season crop, meaning they usually take about 100 to 120 days to mature, and they need consistently cool temperatures in the 50 to 70 degree range. So if I planted them, say in January, they would likely bolt before I ever got a harvest because here in Zone 9, the spring warms up really fast, and so I wouldn't get my harvest in time. But if I were to plant them in October, they would start growing, but then they would likely slow down over the winter, and then they should finish maturing in early spring. However, if I want to start my own Brussels sprout seedlings and get a harvest before it gets too cold, I need to act now. I need to start my seedlings right now in July, transplant in August, and then ideally I'll get a harvest in early December. And I know it seems weird because if you're in a hot area where it's still in the 90s or hundreds, it just doesn't seem right to be planting for cool weather crops right now. And the problem that I personally have is that because I'm in that forgiving winter climate, I always end up planting too late because I know things aren't going to get killed off in the winter. And even though I appreciate the fact that I have that mild winter climate that doesn't kill off all my crops, I always kick myself for not planting sooner because I usually don't get that fall harvest like I always want. So if you're thinking, okay, well, this all sounds great, I'm starting to understand, or maybe I just feel more confused, I just want a simple plan of what to grow and when to plant. Well, don't worry because I've got you covered. On August 5th through 7th, I'm hosting a brand new fall garden challenge, and I would love for you to join me. Over 3 days, I'm going to be going live each day on Zoom to help you plan what to grow, when to plant it, and how to make it thrive for a successful fall season. Whether your summer garden has struggled or you're just ready to actually enjoy gardening in cooler weather, fall gives you a clean slate. So this challenge is completely free and it's the best way to get organized and excited about your fall garden. Just head to the link in the description below to get signed up. But now, as promised, here are some things you can do right now that will set you up for success this fall season. So the very first thing is to make a list of what you want to grow. Pick a few fast-growing crops like lettuce or radishes so you can get some quick wins, and then add in some longer maturing crops like broccoli or cabbage that are going to take a little bit longer to mature, but they're still great to grow during the fall season. Number 2 is to order your seeds now. Even if you're not planting today or next week, go ahead and get your seeds so that as soon as you're ready, you have them on hand. Number 3 is to prepare your beds. So remove any summer plants that are done producing, add some compost, and give your soil a little refresh. You don't have to do a full overhaul. You just want to give your fall crops a little boost. And then tip number 4 is to set up irrigation if you haven't already. So if you have not already set up irrigation in your home garden, fall is the perfect time to do so because it's cooler outside. And then you're going to thank yourself later when summer rolls around again. And I know that fall gardening might just be something you feel like you can skip, especially if you're tired after a long, hot summer. But I promise if you give it a try, it will probably become your new favorite season. I know for me, I always talk about the fact that tomatoes are my favorite crop, which is what always gives me that motivation I need for my summer garden. But if it weren't for tomatoes, I would likely just skip the summer garden and only grow in the fall because it's just such an enjoyable time of year. The cooler temperatures, the slower pace, and the wide variety of crops that you can grow just make it such a rewarding experience. So even if you've never planted a fall garden before, let this be your year. And if you want help planning it all out, join me in the Fall Garden Challenge. I would love to walk you through it and help you feel confident moving forward. But I know whether you're a beginner gardener or have had poor results in the past, you likely had a few questions come up today as you listen to this episode, and so I wanted to take the time to talk through them with you today to just set you up for success on your own, or even if you want to come to the Fall Garden Challenge, to just get those questions answered now. So the first question is, how do I know exactly when to plant each crop in my zone or climate? And this is a great question because it's likely not a surprise that gardening is very localized. It's not a one-size-fits-all, everybody plant lettuce on the same day kind of situation. We all have different planting dates, and that's what can make gardening fun, but also very difficult, right? And so if you would like help planning out your personalized planting plan specific to your climate, I would really encourage you to sign up for the Fall Garden Challenge because on the very first day of the challenge, we actually have a very special bonus training with the co-founders of Seedtime, which is my absolute favorite garden planning software, and they're going to be walking us through how to create a personalized planting plan no matter what climate you live in. But for a quick answer of when to plant, it's really important to look at two things. The first is how long a crop takes to mature. So for example, something like lettuce might only take 30 days, while something like Brussels sprouts could take 100 plus days. The second thing you need to look at is the actual weather forecast in your specific area, not just what the planting calendar says. A lot of planting guides will tell you to just plant by a certain date, but that really only works if your weather lines up. So instead, look at the temperature range that crop prefers, which in general, your cool season crops are going to thrive when daytime temperatures are between 50 and 70. And then you want to check your forecast to make sure that you have enough time in that range for that crop to mature. And that's really the key to planning out your planting dates. But like I mentioned, we're having that bonus training with Seedtime. And if that's the only thing you watch during the challenge, I know you're going to have some great takeaways. So be sure to check that link in the description. And now the second common question that I hear all the time that relates to fall gardening is, what do I do if I still have summer crops producing? And the answer to this one depends, because if you have enough space, you can keep your summer crops in the ground and you can plant your fall crops. However, I know lots of you are limited on space. And so if you don't have the space, you're going to have to make a choice. But in my opinion, if you have already had some great harvests from your summer crops, it could be worth pulling them out to make the space for your fall crops, which are going to continue producing into the winter. Or you could just keep a couple of your favorites, maybe just one tomato plant, and then make space for a few fall crops. But there are so many great options such as lettuce, spinach, and radishes that also don't take up very much space. So you can likely fit them into spaces that you already have while keeping your summer crops in the ground. Or you can even grow them in containers, which then leads me to my next common question, which is, can I still plant in containers or raised beds during the fall and winter? And the answer to this one is absolutely yes. In fact, if you live in a hot climate, it can be really difficult to grow summer crops in containers because they dry out much quicker and the soil warms up faster. And so it's actually pretty difficult to have success with container gardening if you live in a hot climate. But in the cooler weather, container gardening is so much easier and you're likely going to have great success. So say you still have summer crops growing, you could just leave them out in the garden until they're all done for the season, plant all of your fall veggies in containers, and then you have the best of both worlds. If you've ever had poor results with container gardening in the past during the summer, it's definitely worth trying in the fall because it's just an entirely different ball game. And then the next question is, what should I do if I plant late and my crops don't mature before winter? So, if you plant a little bit late and your crops aren't going to mature before winter hits, don't stress. In most mild winter climates, like here in the Central Valley, your cool season crops will likely just go somewhat dormant during the coldest months. They'll kind of hang out and pause their growth, but then once the weather starts warming back up in late winter and early spring, they'll pick right back up where they left off. That means your broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, and even carrots or beets might not be ready in December, but come February or March, you'll likely still get a really great harvest. So what I recommend doing is continuing to care for your garden through the winter. Keep it watered during any dry spells, protect your crops from any hard frost with a row cover if needed, and then just let nature do its thing. However, if you're in a colder climate where you get hard freezes or snow for long stretches, planting late can be a little more limiting, but it's definitely not a lost cause. So some of your crops may not make it to maturity before winter hits, especially the longer season ones like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, or Brussels sprouts, but not all is wasted. So here's what I'd recommend. First, see what survives the frost. Many cool season crops like kale, spinach, and even lettuces can tolerate a light frost, and so you should be able to get a harvest before the winter really sets in. The second tip is to harvest what you can early. If your crops are still small but they're healthy, you can harvest them as baby greens, mini heads, or smaller root crops. You're just going to have to scale your expectations. You might not get that big, beautiful head of cabbage, but if it's on the smaller side, you can just harvest it young if it's not going to survive the winter. The next tip would be to protect and extend your season. If you're expecting a cold snap, you can use row covers, cold frames, or even plastic totes temporarily to add some frost protection. Sometimes that extra few degrees makes all the difference and can buy you a couple more weeks. And then tip number 4 is to think of this as just your learning year. Even if you don't get a full harvest, it's a great experience for next fall. You're going to better understand your timing, your frost dates, and which crops are worth planting earlier next time. Hence why I am planning out my fall garden in summer. I know it seems early, but it's better to be too early than too late in most scenarios. And if you want help figuring out what you can grow in your climate and when to start indoors and outdoors, that's what we're going to be covering during the Fall Garden Challenge. So you're welcome to join no matter what zone you're in. And then the final common question related to fall gardening that comes up is what to plant if I'm a total beginner? And so before we wrap up, I just want to say if you're completely new to gardening or you've had a tough time with fall crops in the past, just keep it simple. Start small with just a few things so you don't overwhelm yourself. A few of my favorite crops to recommend are fresh greens and herbs like lettuce, spinach, and cilantro. You can grow all of them very easily by seed. They're budget friendly, and even if your first planting doesn't go perfectly, you're really not out much time or money, and you can just easily replant. That's the joy of planting seeds. A packet of seeds just costs a few dollars, and if you plant a few and they don't sprout, you can just easily replant. Plus, these are all cut and come again crops, meaning once you harvest, they'll keep growing and give you another round. It's the perfect way to build confidence and get those early wins. So if you've been on the fence about planting this fall, I hope this episode gives you the clarity and encouragement to get started. Don't let the calendar or the end of summer burnout convince you otherwise. Head to the link in the show notes to grab your free spot in the Fall Garden Challenge, and let's make this your best gardening season yet. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.